You don't need to shout. You don't need to explain. You don't need to write long messages, pouring out your heart just to be heard by someone who never truly listened in the first place. You need one moment, one decision, one action rooted in self-respect, and it changes everything. Here's the truth. Most people don't want to say out loud, toxic people aren't complicated. They're predictable. They come in patterns. Same tactics, different names. They poke until you react. They twist your words. They guilt you. They make you feel like peace is a luxury you don't deserve. But the moment you stop feeding that cycle, the game ends. You do this once, and they never bother you again. Start here. Set a silent boundary, not a loud one. Loud boundaries come from pain. Silent boundaries come from clarity. When someone crosses your line and you don't scream, you don't threaten, you don't fight, you just shift. You stop replying, you stop sharing, you stop entertaining their chaos. That silence is deafening, and they feel it. It's not passive aggressive, it's self-preservation. You don't need to get into debates with people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You don't need to win every argument. When someone shows you a version of themselves that's cruel, manipulative, or draining, you don't need to ask why they did it. You need to ask why you stayed after they did. And once that question gets honest, the door opens. Some people only stay in your life because you keep letting them explain away their bad behavior. The moment you stop over-explaining, they panic. They thrive off your need to be understood. So stop handing them that power. No is a full sentence. That doesn't work for me is enough. You don't owe paragraphs to people who wouldn't give you a sentence of accountability. Next time a toxic person tries to bait you, don't react. Mirror. Not emotionally, but calmly. Let their sarcasm echo back as indifference. Let their insults bounce off a face that doesn't flinch. Let them watch you protect your peace without lifting your voice. It confuses them. Why? Because they can't argue with someone who doesn't step into the ring. Then go deeper. Don't just cut contact. Cut access. There's a difference. You can block someone's number and still think about them all day, but when you truly remove access to your energy, your time, your emotional space, that's when you win. You stop talking about them, you stop checking on them, you stop letting their shadow live rent-free in your head, and that is where your freedom begins. If someone can disrespect you once and stay in your life, what you've told them is, there's room for this behavior here. But the first time you calmly show them there's not, everything shifts. Not because they changed, but because you did. And sometimes all it takes is one firm, quiet move to reclaim your peace. This isn't about revenge. It's not about being cold. It's about drawing the kind of line that says, I love myself too much to live in your storm. And the moment you make that choice, even once, toxic people lose the map to find you. And you start breathing again. Toxic people often rely on your reaction to fuel their behavior. It's not just what you say. They're watching how you respond, how flustered you get, how much attention you give them. The louder your reaction, the more control they feel they have over you. They thrive in chaos. They know how to press the right buttons because they've learned your emotional patterns. The moment you start raising your voice, over-explaining yourself, or defending every move you make, they feel like they're winning. That's why setting a silent boundary is the one thing that flips the entire game on its head. It confuses them. They expect a fight. They expect tears. They expect drama. But when all they get is silence, stillness, and no reaction, they don't know what to do with it. That's power. A silent boundary is not about ghosting people or being passive-aggressive. It's about making a decision within yourself that someone no longer deserves access to the parts of you they once exploited. It's a decision that says, I'm not going to teach you how to treat me anymore. I'm just going to show you that mistreating me means losing me. You don't announce it. You don't warn them. You don't even argue. You just shift. The conversations become shorter. The explanations disappear. The emotional investment dries up. You start replying with peace instead of proving your point. And slowly, they start to realize that they're losing the grip they once had. Toxic people don't respond to logic. They respond to energy. That's why trying to reason with them feels like talking in circles. They twist facts. They deflect blame. They manipulate emotions. But when you respond with calm detachment, when you set a boundary that isn't loud or reactive, they start to lose their leverage. Think of it like turning off the lights in a room where someone's trying to perform a show. The audience is gone, the spotlight is off, the performance becomes pointless, and eventually they walk off the stage. What makes silent boundaries so powerful is that they protect your peace without putting you in emotional debt. You don't have to spend your energy explaining why you're hurt. You don't have to write essays defending your decision. You don't even have to convince them they're wrong because you've stopped seeking their validation. That's what changes everything. When you stop needing toxic people to understand your pain, you finally start healing. And they feel that shift. They feel your silence. They notice the absence of your attention, and they realize that whatever game they were playing, they're now playing it alone. The beauty of this approach is that it doesn't require confrontation. Not everyone deserves closure. Not everyone deserves a goodbye speech. Some people deserve nothing more than your absence. And when you give them that, not out of hate, but out of love for yourself, it's a message louder than words. It says, I've outgrown the need to argue with you. I've outgrown the need to be seen by someone who only looks at me when they want something. I've outgrown the cycle. And here's what's even more powerful. When you start setting silent boundaries, you start attracting peace into your life. You realize that not everything needs your reaction. Not every insult needs your defense. Not every accusation needs your explanation. Some things are simply not worth your breath. That's not weakness. That's maturity. That's emotional intelligence. That's you choosing to respond from a place of strength rather than insecurity. The moment you choose stillness over screaming, quiet over chaos, you begin to rewrite the rules of how people can treat you. And toxic people, they don't stick around when they're not being fed. When you stop being available for the games, the drama, the emotional tug of war, they retreat. Not because you told them to, but because your energy no longer entertains their dysfunction. You don't need to fight to be free. You just need one quiet decision made in clarity, acted upon in peace. Set the boundary once. Let your silence speak the message you're tired of repeating, and watch how quickly those who thrived off your reactions suddenly have nothing left to take. Toxic people rarely listen to your words. They study your patterns. They want to see how much space they can take up in your life before you push back. And when you try to argue or explain, they use your own words against you. That's why traditional confrontation doesn't work with them. What does work is mirroring. Not mocking, not copying, but reflecting their behavior back at them in a calm, composed, and emotionally neutral way. When someone speaks with disrespect and you mirror it back with quiet boundaries instead of emotional chaos, they see themselves in a way that's hard to escape. And most toxic people cannot stand their own reflection. Mirroring is a subtle form of communication that doesn't require direct confrontation. It's about holding up a mirror without raising your voice. It's when someone tries to manipulate you with guilt, and instead of justifying yourself, you let the guilt fall flat. It's when someone tries to gaslight you into believing your reality is false, and instead of spiraling into self-doubt, you calmly say, that's not how I experienced it, and leave it at that. The point is not to get them to agree. The point is to anchor yourself in truth and let their confusion be theirs to carry. And that's what makes mirroring so powerful. It's not defensive. It's reflective. It doesn't attack, but it makes toxic behavior uncomfortable to maintain. Let's say someone repeatedly interrupts you in conversation, not by accident, but as a way to dominate or dismiss your thoughts. You don't interrupt back with the same aggression. You mirror their lack of respect with firm silence. You stop engaging until they notice. You don't explain, you keep cutting me off. You just go quiet until the weight of their rudeness becomes obvious. It forces awareness, not always right away, but over time, your behavior tells them, I won't play that game. Or maybe someone constantly blames you for things that are out of your control. Instead of rushing to defend yourself like before, you stop feeding that blame. When they say, this is your fault, you respond with stillness. I don't see it that way. No emotion, no back and forth, no trying to convince them otherwise. That calm disagreement, mirroring their own deflection with unwavering steadiness, stops the conversation from becoming another round of emotional ping pong. The key is staying grounded. Toxic people want you to get emotional because emotions are easier to manipulate. But when you're calm, when you're centered, when you mirror their patterns instead of reacting to them, they lose the ability to control the interaction. You're not there to fix them. You're there to protect you. And mirroring is one of the cleanest ways to do that without compromising your integrity. It's important to remember that mirroring isn't about revenge. You're not doing it to hurt them. You're doing it to help yourself. You're creating a psychological pause, a moment where they can see their own reflection through your unshakable response. Whether they take that moment to change is not your responsibility. Your job is to stop giving them the emotional firewood they need to keep the dysfunction burning. And this doesn't just apply to verbal abuse. It applies to emotional withdrawal, manipulation, guilt tripping, even passive aggression. When someone sends you a cold, clipped message meant to trigger your insecurity, and you respond with emotional neutrality, they're left holding their own bitterness. You're not cold. You're just not playing anymore. And in that moment, they are forced to sit with themselves. Mirroring helps you shift the balance of power without drama. You're no longer participating in the tug of war. You're letting them pull at a rope you no longer hold. You don't need to yell or perform. You need to reflect calmly and clearly that their behavior isn't getting the reaction they want. That's when the pattern breaks. That's when they realize they're not as powerful as they thought. And that's when you start reclaiming the emotional space they once occupied. Toxic people rely on your explanations to maintain control. Every time you try to clarify, defend, or justify your decisions, you're unknowingly giving them more material to twist. Over-explaining comes from a place of wanting to be understood, to be seen as good, reasonable, fair. But with toxic individuals, that vulnerability is ammunition. They don't want clarity, they want control. And as long as you keep explaining, they keep spinning the story in their favor. That's why one of the most powerful things you can do is stop, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. Because the truth is, people who really respect you don't need 5 paragraphs to understand your no. When you explain too much, what you're really doing is asking for permission. You may not realize it, but every time you list your reasons for setting a boundary or walking away, you're hoping they'll validate your choice. But toxic people rarely will. They will poke holes in your reasons. They'll find a way to flip the situation so it sounds like you're the problem. You'll say, I'm stepping away because I need peace. And they'll respond with, oh, so now I'm the source of all your problems. That's how they bait you. That's how they keep the argument going. And suddenly your boundary turns into another exhausting debate. But when you stop over-explaining, you break that cycle. You don't owe long-winded justifications to people who disregard your feelings. If someone asks you why you didn't answer a call, you don't need to tell them about your entire day. I was busy is enough. If someone asks why you set a certain boundary, because it's what I need right now, is enough. No further detail, no rehearsed speech. The less you explain, the clearer it becomes. Your decisions are not up for discussion. It takes strength to resist the urge to explain, especially when you've been conditioned to please. Maybe you grew up in an environment where peace meant over-accommodating others. Maybe you were taught that love is earned by bending, shrinking, proving. But there comes a point when you realize your peace is not a debate. Your needs are not courtroom evidence. You are allowed to make decisions based on what feels right for you, even if others don't agree. You teach people how to treat you, not just by what you say, but by what you're willing to repeat. The moment you find yourself explaining the same thing over and over to someone who isn't listening, you have to pause and ask yourself, is this person really confused, or are they just pretending so they can keep crossing the line? Because confusion fades with clarity. Disrespect stays even when you've been crystal clear. And when you see that, you stop explaining, you start choosing. There's also a peace that comes with trusting yourself. When you stop explaining, you begin to stand taller in your truth. You realize you don't need to be understood by someone who isn't even trying. You don't need to be liked by people who only like you when you're convenient. That silence after their question, the one where you don't give them what they expect, is powerful. It says, I've grown out of needing your permission to be at peace. And it's not about being cold or dismissive. It's about being clear. You still communicate, but you do it from a place of calm authority. You speak without defending. You decide without performing. That kind of presence is magnetic and intimidating to those who once fed off your insecurity, because now they can't guilt you. They can't manipulate you. They can't twist your words when you're not giving them any to twist. Letting go of the habit to over-explain doesn't mean shutting down. It means you've started speaking a different language, the language of boundaries, self-trust, and quiet strength. It's a language toxic people don't understand. And that's exactly why they start to fall away. Not because you made them leave, but because you stopped giving them reasons to stay. Toxic people are drawn to emotional stimulation. They feed off your highs and lows, your outrage, your tears, your frustration. The more unpredictable your emotional response, the more entertaining you are to them. It's why they provoke you, why they create drama, why they push buttons they already know will hurt. But when you remove that emotional reaction, when you become boring to them, they lose interest. This is what the gray rock method is all about. You become emotionally uninteresting, like a gray rock, plain, calm, unmoved. And for someone who feeds on attention and emotional chaos, that's intolerable. And it might feel unnatural at first, especially if you're someone who feels things deeply. You're used to reacting when someone disrespects you or crosses a line. You want to defend yourself. You want to be understood. But when dealing with someone toxic, emotional engagement is a trap. It doesn't lead to resolution. It leads to more manipulation. They want your passion, not your peace. They want you to yell, cry, and argue because those reactions prove that they still matter to you, that they still have influence over your emotional world. But when you go gray rock, you take that away. This doesn't mean becoming numb. It means being calm on the surface, even if you're angry or hurt inside. It means not showing them your pain, not to suppress your truth, but to protect it. You give them the same emotional energy you'd give a stranger asking for directions, short, polite, uninvolved. Okay, sure, that's fine. No story, no heat, no explanation. Your tone is flat, your body language neutral, your energy grounded. And in that stillness, they find nothing to feed on. They might push harder at first. They'll test you, say something insulting to get a rise out of you, stir old wounds, try to make you feel guilty or stupid or small. But you stay steady. You don't match their tone. You don't defend your choices. You let their words fall flat. They want to see your emotional fire, but you don't give them a single spark. That's where your power is, in the refusal to perform. It's especially effective in environments where you can't completely cut someone off, like work, co-parenting, or certain family dynamics. You still have to interact, but you don't have to engage. You don't give personal information. You don't share feelings. You don't reveal your inner thoughts. Every answer is measured, every reaction filtered. You keep it simple, neutral, and focused only on the task at hand. Over time, they get bored because the only thing they can control is what you give, and you're giving them nothing they can use. There's a kind of quiet strength in being emotionally untouchable. You're no longer scrambling to prove your worth or defend your peace. You're not emotionally bleeding in front of people who would only point at the wound. You've made a choice to starve their appetite for drama. And that choice tells them something loud and clear. I am not available for your games anymore. And this doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you cold. It makes you free. You're not avoiding conflict. You're denying access. You're not shutting down. You're showing that not everyone is entitled to your emotional life. Toxic people live for reaction. They want to feel like they control your mood. But when you practice the gray rock method, they realize they no longer hold that power. You've become someone they can't manipulate because you've stopped showing them where it hurts. Eventually, they stop trying. Not because you told them to, but because you became a place where their games don't work. And they'll move on, looking for someone else who hasn't yet learned what you now know. Peace is more powerful than any reaction. And silence, when used with intention, is the loudest no you'll ever give. There's a difference between cutting contact and cutting access. Most people think that blocking someone, unfollowing them, or avoiding interaction is enough to protect their peace. And sometimes that's a necessary first step. But if that person still lives in your head, if you still replay arguments, check their social media, talk about them constantly, or feel triggered every time their name comes up, they still have access. Emotional access is the deeper layer. It's what truly determines whether or not someone still has power over you. Cutting access means deciding within yourself that they are no longer allowed to affect how you think, how you feel, or how you move. You stop explaining their behavior to others. You stop wondering what they're doing or who they're with. You stop imagining scenarios where they finally understand how much they hurt you. You don't wait for closure and you don't chase it. You reclaim the space in your mind where they used to live. That's when you go from simply avoiding someone to actually being free from them. This is one of the hardest parts of dealing with toxic people, because even when they're physically gone, the damage they've done can echo in your mind. You may still hear their voice in your head, still doubt your instincts, still feel the pull of unfinished conversations. That's normal. But healing begins when you start closing those doors one by one, even if they never get a formal goodbye, because closure isn't something they give you, it's something you give yourself. You decide, the story ends here. You decide they don't get any more chapters in your life. You decide your peace is more important than their presence. Sometimes people stay emotionally involved with toxic individuals out of habit. They've built their identity around trying to fix that person, earn their love, prove their worth. So even after they leave, they keep thinking about what they could have done differently. But here's the truth. If someone made you feel small, unsafe, or constantly unsure of yourself, then no version of you would have ever been good enough for them, because they weren't good enough for the version of you that already existed. And once you know that, you stop looking for explanations. You start creating distance, not just physically, but mentally. Cutting access also means being careful with who you vent to. Sometimes the people you talk to about that toxic person end up carrying their energy back into your space. They might update you on what they're doing. They might question your decision to cut ties. They might keep the story alive when you're trying to let it die. Protecting your peace means being mindful about who gets to speak into your healing. Not everyone deserves a front row seat to your growth, especially if they're still connected to the person you're trying to move on from. Another layer of cutting access is removing the triggers you can control. Unfollow, mute, archive photos, throw away gifts, not because you're bitter, but because you're cleaning house. You're clearing the emotional clutter. Every time you see their name pop up or stumble across something that reminds you of them, it stirs old wounds. And healing doesn't happen when you keep picking at scabs. So let it go. Create a life where their memory isn't constantly walking through the front door The final piece of this is internal discipline. It's the decision you make every day not to give them more of your energy, not to rehearse conversations in your head, not to wonder what they would say or do. When that thought pops up, you redirect it. When that old feeling rises, you ground yourself. Healing isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's the quiet repetition of choosing peace over pain, again and again until it becomes your new normal. Cutting access is how you stop someone from living rent-free in your emotional space. It's not about hate. It's not about revenge. It's about remembering that peace isn't something they can take from you anymore. Because you've locked the door, you've changed the locks, and now only you decide who gets to enter your life, not just physically, but emotionally. And that is where true freedom begins. The first time someone disrespects you, how you respond teaches them everything. People learn your boundaries not from what you say, but from what you allow. If someone speaks to you with sarcasm, cruelty, or dismissiveness, and you stay silent, they take that silence as permission. If someone ignores your needs, mocks your feelings, or crosses your lines, and you forgive without change, they don't learn to treat you better. They learn how much they can get away with. That's why the very first time someone crosses the line is the most important moment to act. Not with anger, not with drama, but with clarity. Setting the tone early is powerful. You don't have to be harsh to be clear. You don't need to curse someone out to set a boundary. All you need is firmness, a calm refusal, a shift in tone, a pause that says, I noticed that, and I won't tolerate it. It's in the way you answer the phone, the way you stop replying, the way you hold eye contact without flinching. You don't have to shout to show strength. You just have to stop rewarding disrespect with more access to your kindness. When you tolerate something once, it opens the door for repetition. Toxic people don't need you to give them 10 chances. They only need one. One time where you look the other way. One time where you downplay your discomfort. One time where you smile through the insult. And after that, it becomes routine. They don't have to ask if it's okay. They assume it is because you didn't push back. And pushing back doesn't mean starting a fight. It means not allowing their behavior to continue unnoticed or unchallenged. Teaching people how to treat you doesn't require long explanations. It's often in what you don't do. You don't laugh at jokes that make you feel small. You don't answer texts at midnight from someone who only shows up when they need something. You don't say it's fine when it isn't. You stop smoothing the path for people who keep throwing stones in yours. And in doing so, you teach them, if you want